Welcome to Black Nouveau. This is our edition for February 25th, 2015. I'm Joanne Williams. This week, Emmy and Golden Globe winner Epatha Merkerson joins us to talk about living with diabetes. We'll meet one of Milwaukee's most honored high school drumlines, and we'll discuss the importance of African Americans in America's history. And speaking of history, I recently spoke with one of the icons of the modern civil rights movement. In the early 1960s, the civil rights movement attracted a young college student named Julian Bond. He helped organize the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Bond fought and marched for the rights of black citizens in the South to register to vote. He was also elected to the Georgia House of Representatives and State Senate, and he was chairman of the NAACP for 14 years. We talked with him when he visited Milwaukee for a YWCA event. We sat down to discuss several issues challenging civil rights today. What is your take on Ferguson?
Ferguson is the new Selma, and people are so angry about it, so irritated about it, they're not going to sit and just let things happen. I think they're going to keep it up. The more noise they make, the more eager it will be to change things from what they are now.
What effect can that have, though? I mean, you've done many, many marches. What effect can people...
Well, it depends on what the response is from the people being marched against. If they see it, if they have a big enough noise made, then they'll do something about it. If not, then it'll be for naught.
In the days that you were doing a lot of marching, were you optimistic that a march would make a difference?
Sure, and generally speaking, they did make a difference. Not every time, every march didn't turn out to be successful, but most of them did, and it's a tactic that worked then, and I think it'll work now.
2014 is different than 1964, though.
Sure it is, but you look around the country at the dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people in almost every city in the country of any shape and size. There's outrage at what happened in Ferguson.
Will it make a difference that we have a case here? There's a case in Ferguson. There are other cases.
There's a case in almost every city in the United States. In almost every city in the United States, within the last 12 months, you can find some occasion where a policeman has taken the life of a black man for no cause, for no reason, because he thought he was in danger, he thought the guy was going to do something to him, that he thought the guy was big and going to beat him up. You can't kill people just because you thought something, or you shouldn't be allowed to anyway. And we ought not stand for it. We shouldn't stand for it in Ferguson. We shouldn't stand for it with Trayvon Martin. Shouldn't stand for it with any of the multiple people with who this has been done to. This is just not something we can tolerate. And I think this is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And how it's going to turn out, I don't know. Because there seems to be no one in charge here or there or someone, just people who are so angry at what happened there and want something done about it that they've lay down the streets. They've risked their lives at traffic stops. They've done all sorts of things, and I think it's only going to get worse and worse, higher and higher.
How long do you think it's going to go on?
I don't know. I don't know how long it can last. You know, it may be one of those things that people say, well, I've done enough of this and I'm tired, but I think this is going to go on for at least a little while.
Are you surprised?
Oh yes, I'm very much surprised.
Could you have predicted this?
I knew this problem would not be solved by the time I got to be 74 years old. I'm 74 now. I thought we'd have solved many of these problems, many more than we have. I thought we'd be in better shape.
Today, Bond is a teacher. He is living history and shares his experiences at American University in Washington, D.C. with college students who may know little or nothing about civil rights. We talked about his current interest in the movement, housing issues, and the hot-button civil rights issue in Wisconsin, voter IDs. Wisconsin is a state where we had a move to have picture IDs.
For what?
To vote.
Why would you have to have that?
Because the governor wanted us to have that.
Because he said there was fraud in the election.
Yes.
You know, who fraud what? The fraud in the election is that he's saying there's fraud in the election. That's what the fraud is. There's no fraud in voting in Wisconsin. There's no fraud in voting in any state in the country. You can't find a state in the union with provable instances of fraud, except when people say it is, and that's not good enough.
Well, it got struck down, and when we had our election in November, we didn't have to have the photo IDs. It was only weeks before the election that the Supreme Court said we don't have to use them. And they're going to bring it back and try and get it instituted before 16.
Sure, because these are just attempts to keep racial minorities and older people from registering and voting, because typically these are populations that vote for the Democrats. These are anti-democratic voter suppression measures. That's all they are. Everybody knows it. The Republicans know it. They admit it all the time. The Democrats know it. They haven't made enough noise about it and yelled and screamed enough about it, but everybody knows what this is. A year ago, or 2 years ago rather, black people turned out in record numbers. In Florida, you saw those lines and lines and lines and lines because the people said, if they don't want me to vote, there must be some reason I should vote. If this guy over here doesn't want me to vote, then there's some reason I should be voting. So of course black people know what it's all about. Smart white people know what it's all about too.
But you'll hear the argument, oh, one vote doesn't count. My vote won't count.
Of course it counts. Of course it counts. One vote always counts. I'd hate to have an election caused by one vote and it was your vote and the good guys lost because you didn't vote. I'd be on your behind like nobody's business.
What's your civil rights cause now?
Well, I'll tell you something we haven't paid as much attention to as we ought to have. And this is across the civil rights movement, the NAACP, all the civil rights organizations. We've never fought for housing integration as much as we should have done. We've done a little bit about it. We've got laws against it. It's against the law to discriminate in housing in the United States. But we don't worry about that as much as we ought to. And to the degree that we don't, we're saying that black people are relegated to the worst kind of housing, the worst kind of schools, the worst kind of education, the worst kind of jobs. We're condemning black people to the worst kind of everything because we're not integrating housing. When we begin to do that, then you're going to see the fortunes of black people begin to rise.
What can you say to a 20-year-old black person to educate them about what's happened in the past and why they should be involved in their politics?
I'd say, brother, sister, look at your history, read your history, read books about what happened yesterday or 20, 30 years ago. Find out what happened then and what's happening now, and make up your mind that you're going to do your part to change things, to make things better. You can do it. I don't care if you're 15 or 20 or 25, you can do it. No matter how old you are, no matter how young you are, you can do it. So do it. We're counting on you. You know, they used to say there are four words that people knew about the civil rights movement, and that was, I have a dream, and two names, Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks. Of course, the civil rights movement was so much more than that, and more than these people, as wonderful as they were. So they need to learn more. They need to find out what happened then, what he did, what she did, what these people did, and what they can do to make this a more perfect union.
Joining us now is Dr. Robert Smith, Associate Professor of History at UWM. Is it true that what most people know about the civil rights movement is I Have a Dream and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks?
Absolutely. I mean, those are the two icons that most people point to in terms of their knowledge of the movement specifically. And yet we know that there are hundreds upon hundreds of other folks that played significant roles. Many of the folks, we don't know their names won't be, haven't been charted in the annals of history books, but you know, there are literally hundreds of folks who played meaningful roles in the movement for equality.
There are, but why is our knowledge so limited to even the other leaders of the movement?
Well, part of that is because it's hard for historians to effectively position other leaders, because we do over-aggrandize particular folks, and understandably so. It's in some ways easier to tell a historical story through the lens of great people. And yet what we have a harder time doing is showing how great all the other folks are who are part of the process as well. And that just takes a much more, a lengthier time in the historical process to get those stories out.
We've talked about learning history at all. Why do you think history isn't emphasized in schools the way you and I think it should be?
Well, history is a tough topic. It's difficult to have honest conversations about history. At what age do we expose young people to the more gruesome components to our historical record? Or how do we then have conversations with students or younger people or people in general about more complicated nuances with history? We oftentimes assume that history is about people and dates and facts, when in actuality, history ebbs and flows. It's cyclical in a lot of ways, and it's oftentimes challenging for us to get to the more important details about the day-to-day experience, because we oftentimes think that the day-to-day experience is mundane.
One of the day-to-day experiences that African Americans went through is slavery. Do we talk about that enough?
Oh, absolutely not. In fact, we have a concerted push to not talk about slavery. In fact, slavery is still the place we have to begin any conversations not only about our nation, but certainly our race relations in the United States even today. In fact, the stain of slavery has left us with the residue of racism. And
even in 2015?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Slavery sets in motion the racial hierarchies that dominate our nation today. Slavery sets in motion fundamental notions about who are the more deserving members of our society. And slavery sets in motion basic ideas about citizenship and who indeed are citizens and who are not full citizens.
But many people say that's 200 years ago. That's all past. It shouldn't have an impact on what happens today.
That's not true. And one way to think about this particular thread is to consider the legal apparatus of our nation. And let me explain by using one particular phrase. Law is a function of ideology. Law is a function of the ideology of the lawmakers, and it then goes on to shape fundamental notions about people and ideologies about groups of people and how society ought to be ordered. And in terms of the racial hierarchies in the United States, slavery as a legal institution set us in motion and provided for us a legal set of mechanisms that defined who we are as people, and then over the course of several centuries stayed with us through emancipation and Jim Crow and into the current era.
And Jim Crow and those sort of things were legal realities in many parts of the country. And when civil rights struggles began, it was mostly African Americans. But are civil rights just an African American thing? Oh,
absolutely not. The question of rights is indeed a national issue and a global issue, whether it's civil rights or if we move it into the realm of human rights. And I want to go back just a little bit regarding my point about law. The system of slavery was a legal institution. What allowed for the institution to become so heinous was that it was indeed codified. And when something becomes legal, when something becomes law, we then assume that it is appropriate, or they at least has this veneer of appropriateness. Jim Crow was a legal institution, right, that looked a lot like slavery. And then, of course, we have to be mindful that the institution of Jim Crow doesn't end until 1964 and 65. And so, indeed, if indeed the system of slavery and its legality impacts Jim Crow, and Jim Crow is only a generation or so removed, then we are certainly still living with the vestiges.
So what kind of history are we making in 2015?
We are making a whole realm of returns to some past issues that we hate to see reemerge. Certainly when we think about mass criminalization, that looks a lot like eras from before when folks are legally denied some fundamental rights or legally moved into an institution that looks a lot like slavery. But we also have this wonderful thing called digital technology that exposes a lot of the injustices in society immediately. And so as much as we have some challenges and continuing issues, we also have some points that hopefully will assist us in that march toward full equality.
So history is made every day, and we should pay attention to it.
Every single day. And the making of history is as mundane. It's as important to remember the mundane components to the historical record as the more glaring and remarkable components.
And people's families are part of history, too, so they should keep track of that.
Absolutely. If there's one charge that each family needs to consider is to indeed record one's own familial history.
And not just your mother and father, but go back as far as you can?
Absolutely. One, because it's easier to do now than it ever was before. But also, particularly as we think about African American history and Black History Month, there is nothing more important and more empowering than making sure that you can connect oneself, that an individual can connect oneself to a familial past.
Thank you very much for talking with us. We could talk about history for a long time.
Absolutely.
But we will talk about it again when more history has been made. Thank you very much for bringing us the importance of knowing our history.
Thank you for having me.
Milwaukee's high school drumline competition was held late last year. Bobby Drake reports on one school's efforts to extend its winning tradition.
We didn't practice for nothing. We came here Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays to practice. We worked hard. We worked hard on this, all right? All right, we want this, so we gonna go get it, all right? All right, King on three. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. All right. Bring it in. Bring it in. All right. Heavenly Lord Father. Wait, take your hats off.
Out of honor and respect.
We work very, very hard for this. We don't take winning for granted at all, even after 9 victories.
Leading the Generals varsity team is an experienced captain on his last competition.
I've been in, well, including middle school, that would be 3, and then plus the 3 already been, so that's 6, and then today will be 7.
How many times have you won?
6.
Leading the Generals junior varsity team is the one they call Qualzilla.
It's like, yeah, we got 5th place when I was a freshman, and then that captain graduated, and then every year since we've been like moving up a place, so hopefully we'll move up again this year.
Winning the title this many times is not luck. I asked Ben Zaber, what does he do that might be different?
We've developed a pretty great tradition of this here at King, and I'm fortunate enough to have some really wonderful student leaders. I provide them advice and guidance and structure and technical help, and they just sort of take that and run with it then. In terms of running rehearsals, selecting music, writing drill for the shows that we do. You know, the kids end up handling an awful lot of that. And I just try to help guide them in that. I think that's one of the things that for us is great about Drumline, that it's a great way for some of the kids to develop leadership.
And the captains didn't dive into their roles, but grew over time, learning new skills and adapting.
Freshman year, I really didn't want to. I was rather, laid back, and the ones that want to be on the behind the scenes and whatnot. But I just wanted to see us keep the legacy going.
I usually start with like teaching basic technical skills to make sure that when we play cadences that they'll be able to do them. Then we learn all the music, and then we learn marching, and it kind of goes in a successive order from there.
For me, that was a challenge, yeah. Just writing down every cadence that we played ever. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but I got it done.
You know, we have 2 rehearsals after school each week, usually starting right around end of August, start of September, and those are 2-hour rehearsals. Plus, we usually run 2 full-day Saturday rehearsals from about 8 to 4. We rehearse for about 4 hours after we do the Milwaukee Holiday Parade, and this year we did another Saturday practice in the morning for about 4 hours. So, about 30 hours of practicing on Saturday on top of those 4 hours every week.
We really didn't know each other at the beginning of the year. Lord Father, we came together as a group, as a family. Lord Father, we pray just help us. Just our seniors last year, Lord Father, we pray let them go out with a bang, Lord Father. Let them have a good day, Lord Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Yeah. 3 on 3, 1, 2, 3, game!
And this was the day they prepared for.
Put their heads together for Rufus King High School JV under the direction of Ben Zaber.
Competition was fierce between the lines. But in the end,
Third place with a total of 66.3, King JV.
Riverside came in second,
Milwaukee Public Schools, your 10-time champion, Rufus King High School varsity.
King on three. 1, 2, 3. King! Let's go.
Diabetes is the 4th leading cause of death among African Americans, but having the disease does not have to be a death sentence. Our guest, Epatha Merkerson, is living proof. You have diabetes. When were you diagnosed and how did that happen?
It was about 12 years ago. I was doing a health fair, and I got to the table that was set up for a medical school. My blood sugar was taken, and when the camera was cut off, the doctor asked me to come back, and I thought he was going to ask for an autograph or a picture. And he told me that my blood sugar registered very high and that I should speak to my doctor. So I did, and indeed was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes.
Is that in your family? Did you have any suspicion that you might have it too?
I do have a history. Yeah, I do have a history. My father died from complications of type 2 diabetes. My grandmother lost her sight. I have a brother who's dealing with the issue now. But you know, I didn't recognize any of the symptoms. And what I've learned is that it is different for each individual. And that's why I'm so happy that I've teamed up with Merck on the America's Diabetes Challenge and to encourage people who have type 2 diabetes or a history of type 2 diabetes in their families to know their A1C. And the A1C is a simple test that's taken that allows your doctor or healthcare provider to get an overview of your how you're managing your blood sugar levels, and that will best help him come up with the treatment plan, the two of you to come up with the treatment plan to help you reach your A1C goal and manage your blood sugar.
You're making this a challenge. You're saying to people, go out and find out what your situation is, and then if you find out you have diabetes,
absolutely
do something.
Absolutely. Well, the reason why I think it's America's Diabetes Challenge is that there are 29 million Americans in this country, 29 million Americans who have diabetes. So yeah, I'm challenging people to really start having this dialogue with your coworkers, with your family and friends. It's time for us to really be a part and proactive in our health care.
Now,
and this challenge is really important to me in terms of helping get the word out about the importance of A1C and what it can be in managing your health.
Now, you know, a lot of folks, particularly African Americans, will say, well, I'm not going to the doctor until I'm sick. Is that the right attitude to take?
Of course not, and that's why I hope that they'll see me and they'll see that this is something that I'm going through. I'm not talking about something that's happening to someone else. I'm talking about what's happening with me and how I'm able to manage this. And I believe that if I can do this, that other people are capable of doing it as well. And what's most important to me is that we understand this is something that is manageable. So it's nothing to fear. It is only something that can be helpful. And if they go to our website, if they're curious, go to our website, americasdiabetieschallenge.com, and read the information on the website. I think that it will encourage them, especially if they have a history of type 2 diabetes, to get some answers.
What do you do?
And to know that it's...
I was just going to say, what do you do to maintain your levels? Do you exercise? Do you change your diet?
What I do is, I had to change the way I eat. That was a big thing for me, changing my diet. And it took a while to change it, and to a point where I think that I eat much better now. I had to get off the bus and out the subway and start walking, exercising, and it's possible. That's why I'm proud of doing this, because it can be done. I'm an example of how you can be proactive in your health care, and also to let people know not to be discouraged, because it's a progressive condition. So over the years, my treatment plan has changed, and the one thing that I understand now is that it will change. It may not have anything to do with me. Maybe, I should eat something a little differently. I should exercise a little bit more. But I try not to get discouraged. So I'm here to say, don't get discouraged if your treatment plan changes.
And find a way to meet this challenge, just like somebody they see on television all the time. That's you. And they can say, if she can do it, I can do it. Thank you very much for talking with us on Black Nouveau.
Yeah.
And that's Black Nouveau for this week. I'm Joanne Williams. Thanks for joining us.